I'm Raymond Hardy, and today I am going to show you how to make one of my all-time favorite meals, a Chinese classic Kung Pao chicken. Now, this is just not any Kung Pao chicken. This is Kung Pao chicken with pineapple and bell pepper. Now, you're probably saying, Raymond, pineapple and bell pepper, Kung Pao chicken doesn't have pineapple and bell pepper. Well, you're absolutely right. But in this particular recipe that I've developed over the years, you'll find that this recipe is absolutely delicious. Now, one other thing, I'm not putting in peanuts. That's the choice. If you decide to put in peanuts, that's perfectly fine. But in this particular recipe, I'm not going to do that. Now, if you look at the traditional Chinese food, and Kung Pao chicken in particular, it really is more of a dried, it has a dry sauce to it. In this recipe, because I'm going to make it a little bit larger in volume in terms of the amount of chicken, I'm going to double my sauce. But you'll find in the end that this recipe turns out to be absolutely delicious. So with that having been said, let's get started. Okay, in front of me you'll see some of the ingredients that we're going to use for my recipe. Let me get a little closer so that we can take a better look at what we have here. Right here, you'll see that I have cornstarch, sugar, soy sauce. Right here, if you can't see it, let me get a little closer. This is a cooking sherry. Right here is white wine vinegar. I have canola oil. Down here, I have ground white pepper. Here are the pineapples, or pineapple chunks to be exact. This is a can of water chestnuts. We have chicken broth, sea salt. Down here I have the red peppers. You can buy this at any Mexican store, or basically any store. Actually, all the stuff you can buy from your local store. Down here I have green onions. Next to here I have ginger root. Right here is a nice fresh garlic. And finally, last but not least, a red bell pepper. So as you can see, these are all the ingredients that are going to be used for this recipe. So why don't we start cutting the meat, or cutting the chicken, and let's get started putting this recipe together. Okay, we're back, ready to start cutting our chicken. So the first thing you want to do is whenever you're working with meat, chicken in this case, we want to wash off the meat or chicken in cold water. Wipe it off, wash it off, and then go ahead and sort of pat it down, and then we can get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start cutting this chicken. What I have here is 1.5 pounds of chicken meat. And I'm going to start cutting it in bite-sized pieces. And in doing that, we just want to make sure that we have, even piece cuts. And after we get through cutting it, we're going to go ahead and start putting in some of the other ingredients, the other condiments, and get the seasoning going. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this cut. Okay, this looks pretty good. So now, the next thing that we want to do is go ahead and take the chicken, put it in this white bowl, and we're going to start adding the seasonings. So I'll just set this right here. So the first thing that I'm going to add is 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. So what I did is I went ahead and set this out previously so that I wouldn't have to sit here and fumble like I'm doing now, trying to figure out how much to put in. So I have 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. So let me put this in. The next, I'm going to put in 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Kind of sprinkle that around. Next, I'm going to put in 1/8 teaspoon of white pepper. And this white pepper actually is pretty peppery. I was rather surprised. Next, I want to put in 1 tablespoon of canola oil. So let me do that. I have a 1 tablespoon right here, 1 tablespoon of canola oil, along with the last ingredient, which is 1 tablespoon of cooking sherry. So let's go ahead and add that. So go ahead and add the cooking sherry. Now, just stick your hands in and start mixing around. And mix around thoroughly, because you know sometimes these dry ingredients don't always mix in as well as you think they should. So you know, give it a nice mix. Because after I get done mixing it, the next thing that I'm going to do is put this in the refrigerator and let it marinate while I'm doing the other ingredients. So let's get this here. And I think this is looking pretty good. Okay. So, on to step 3. Okay, now we're ready to start mixing our sauce. So the first thing we want to do is get 6 tablespoons of chicken broth. So let me get my chicken broth here. Dole out 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Next, what we want is 4 tablespoons of soy sauce. So let's get that. This is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Next, we want 2 tablespoons of white wine vinegar. So let's pour that out. That's 1, 2. Next, we want 2 tablespoons of dry cooking sherry. So that's 1, 2. Okay, now what I did is I went ahead and set out our next 2 ingredients. I need 4 teaspoons of sugar and 4 teaspoons of cornstarch. So what I did is I went ahead and set those out already. So here's my sugar, here's my cornstarch. So just go ahead and throw those in there. 4 teaspoons each, and I'll start whisking and let the magic work. Now the recipe that I use actually is a little bit more in terms of the sauce. I think you'll find that some recipes may use a little less. I use a little bit more only because I find that for the recipe that normally goes with this mix is half of what I usually use. But well, I should say, if I used half, which is the normal amount, the kung pao chicken tends to be a little dry. So I like a little sauce in my kung pao chicken. So this is what I do. I go ahead and I double the amount. Now you'll find that in most recipes and in most cooking places that cook kung pao chicken, they won't have it as saucy as I have, but I don't think you'll find anything wrong with the amount of sauce that I use. In fact, it's better to have more sauce and not need it than to have not enough sauce and need it. So this is the amount that I use, and typically I'll put the whole thing in, and you'll find that it's very tasty, and actually you may end up putting in the same amount that I put in. So with that having been said, it's on to cooking the green onions and garlic and everything else. So I hope you enjoyed this little episode, so on to the next step. Okay, now it's time to start cutting our vegetables. What I have here is I'm going to cut a red bell pepper and cut it into slices that are about a quarter pieces. Okay, next I'm going to cut my green onions here. Cut them in about 1 inch or 1.5 inch lengths. I have about 4 here. I like green onions. Next, we need about 1 tablespoon of ginger root. So what I do, and the way that I do it, is I'll take the grater here and take the small side of the grater, and I'll go ahead and take the ginger root, and I'll just grate myself 1 tablespoon, or the approximation of 1 tablespoon of ginger root. And a lot of it sort of hangs on this back side here. So let me keep going. Now, some people, you know, they don't like the rind part of the ginger root. I like everything. I was talking to a guy a long time ago who owned a Chinese restaurant. He said, you grate the whole thing. And so that's what I've been doing ever since. So is that about 1 tablespoon? I think so. Let me just give it a little bit more. Sometimes I could just eyeball this. Okay, that looks about right. So next, let me take garlic, 2 cloves of garlic, and I'll do the same thing. Now just grate these also. Now some people, you know, they like to buy the garlic already, you know, pre-grated, I guess, at the store. You could buy it like that already, so you don't have to do all this. But I like fresh garlic right out the, you know, right, freshly done. So this is what I like to do. Okay. So there we go. Garlic and ginger. On to the next step.